What makes an improvised character interesting? What makes them strong? What makes them have a very unique point of view? And we're going to break it down. So the first thing is how do you just create an improvised character off the top of your head? And it's easy. It's pretty much just given a stance, which can lead to a voice. Right. So if you're walking around the room, let's say that you're walking around the room neutral, right? You're just walking how you typically would walk down the street or whatever. And then at some point, lead with a different body part. So, for example, you might start leading with your chin and you're walking around like this character. And see how my voice kind of naturally starts to change when I get into this simple thing of putting my chin out. It's like, who's this character? Who does this character remind you of? To me, this character comes off as a kind of dimwit know-it-all, right? So when you want to just create like a simple character in improv, just lead with the body part. It's even as simple as like if I just lean in with my shoulder, just sitting here, it's like, hey, who's this character? Overly confident dude, right? Like my voice has changed, my stance has changed, and I'm just sitting in, leaning with my shoulder. And then you had this character too. So creating characters, it's interesting because there's this cool psychological thing in the human mind is that physicalities will change the way that our voice is heard, right? And it can be based upon simple emotions too, right? Obviously, like if you're scared, your voice gets a little bit softer, gets a little bit tender. You get your body's a little bit more closed off because you're scared. When you're confident, your chest is up, your voice gets a little bit more powerful, has a little bit more vigras behind it, right? You're speaking a little bit clear. Your diction is powerful, right? When you're unsure, your body language can be your arms are crossed and it's a little muffled, it's a little mumbly, right? Your brain is trying to figure it out. So it's interesting because they're both connected. Your stance will give you a certain type of vocal arrangement with it. And when you change your voice, usually we'll do the same thing. But I think it's easier just to have a physicality that will affect your voice, right? So the thing you can do is you can walk around the room and just lead with a different body part, be it shoulders, be it your chin, be it your forehead, be it your nose, it could be anything. And be interested to see how it changes your voice. And then boom, that is a basic improvised character. It's just body and voice. It's very simple. Now, the next component, though, is the character's point of view and how they think and how they react and how they perceive the world. Now, here is the thing. Obviously, is that improv is a comedic art. And stand-up and sketch comedy is a comedic art, too. And the reason we have to think about why is it that people watch comedy theater. It is because that the character or the artist has a very unique perspective on society, right? Like we as people see things one way and somebody else might see it exactly as something else, right? And with an improv character, they have to be comedic. There has to be a comedic, entertaining element there. So you have to create a point of view that is satirical and not common of the society norm. And the best way I can explain that is that I want you to imagine like there's a plane, right? There's just a big long line, right? Let's imagine that this pen here is what I like to call the spectrum of society. And right here in the middle of the spectrum is what I like to call is the 99%. And what that means is 99% of the time, society will always do this, right? Like when the light is green, they will go. When the light is red, they will stop, right? When they are hungry, they will eat. 99% of the time, in the middle here on the spectrum, society will do the exact thing, right? They follow the rules, right? There are the rules of society. The social norm is what people call. Then you have this side where the little clicker is, right? This is what I like to call the 1% side. And what this side is where you do the complete opposite of what society does. Or you see things the complete opposite as society does. So like if we go back here to the middle of the spectrum, 99% of the time, society sees pizza as food. If we go over here to the 1% side, here the clicker pen, 1% of the time, people in this point of view, see pizza as an art form or maybe something they want to wear, right? So it's the complete opposite, but it has a very unique perspective of what society has. And I'll give you an example. I always tell the story is I remember one time I was in a Walgreens, and I had a pair of like khaki jeans on, and I had a blue polo on. And I looked like a Walgreens employee, and it was tucked in. Like I went tucked in that day, right? Now, when I was standing there, I was looking at chapsticks, and a little kid and the mom came around the corner and asked me if I worked at the Walgreens. They were like, hey, do you work here? Now, if we go back to our spectrum line here, in the middle, 99% of the time, society will say what? They'll say no. So they'll say, like, I'm sorry, I don't work here. Maybe I can help you find an employee, but I apologize. Now, but as we go to my side, the 1% side, clicky side, I did the complete opposite. I said, yes, I do work here. I'm also the manager. I don't know why, but I made myself the manager, right? Typically, society, you wouldn't even do that. So I said, yeah, I'm the manager. How can I help you? You need chapsticks. Here you go. They're 2 for $1. Have a Walgreens-y day. And I don't know why I said this, but I said, remember, you can go online and give us a review of your experience today. I don't know why I did that, but that's a perfect example of where an improvised character's mind should be. Their mind should live here, right here on the 1% of the comedy society spectrum, right? Because if your character sounds more like what people would typically do in society, then they're not that interesting, right? And the best example is I want you to think of like TV shows like Seinfeld. If you've ever seen Seinfeld, it's a really great example of, scenarios where people, do the complete opposite of what society would normally do. Like sitcom comedy is a great example of that. Another great TV show would be The Office. Like Michael Scott is a great example because he does the complete opposite of what every typical middle manager in America does. But that's what makes the show interesting, is because you have a character that has a very unique perspective on a society situation. Right? And sometimes it can be as easy as just having an opposite opinion, right? So for example, if I play a doctor and I came into the scene and I said, you broke your arm, and remember, 99% of the time, how would society respond to that? In the middle, they might say like, oh man, I feel really sad. But you could do the complete opposite and be like, this is amazing. I'm so happy that I broke my arm. I have so many things that I want to do now that I've broken my arm. I want to be able to Netflix and chill and eat nachos. I don't want to have to play sports. It's amazing. Having a broken arm has really opened my eyes to not doing anything, and it's really changed my life, right? And that's here. That's the 1%. I have a completely different, opposite, unique perspective, but I also justify that perspective, right? I justify, like, I'm happy that I broke my arm. Why? Well, because I get to have an amazing life of doing nothing. And that's where the comedy comes from with an improvised character, is that you are justifying your non-society norm point of view. Pretty much in stand-up comedy, that's considered the punchline, right? Like the setup in a stand-up comedy joke, like when I'm teaching a stand-up comedy class, the setup is that your complete opposite viewpoint, and then your justification is typically the punchline. And that is the most unique, easiest formula to create a joke, but it's also the same formula that you use when creating an improvised character, because it's very, very important that your improvised character has a very unique point of view that is nowhere near how society would think. Because if your character just comes across as like someone you would see in everyday life, it's not that interesting. The audience will get bored. They're not that unique. The audience doesn't want that, right? When people come to see a show or they watch a TV or movies, They don't want to watch characters that just remind them of like, oh yeah, I saw that guy yesterday, right? They want to see, they want to see something new. They want to see somebody who has a new perspective on life. That's why people are so attracted to inspirational speakers, is because they have such a unique, profound view on society and on how to like do things. Same thing in improv. So to recap, a strong improvised character needs to have a body stance, a very unique voice, and a very unique point of view, which typically just always needs the complete opposite of what the society norm would do in that situation, but also you have to justify it. Now, I know that seems like a lot, so you might need to watch this video again, but that's the way to create a very strong, unique character that can drive an improvised scene.